Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its weight. Allow your breathing to even out. There is no destination to reach tonight, no arrival to consider. The journey has already slowed. The path will carry itself. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called The Quiet Life of a River Cartographer. You arrive where the river narrows without announcing it, not at a marked point, not at a bridge, just at the place where the water draws inward as if it has remembered a smaller shape and decided to keep it. The banks hold closer here, not tight, not steep, simply nearer, guiding the current into a quieter corridor. The air beside the surface is cooler than the path behind you, not cold, just lower, as though the river keeps its own temperature close and the evening is content to let it. You step down from the footpath and the ground changes immediately. The soil near the water yields a fraction beneath your boots, faintly damp, accepting weight without fuss. The slope is gentle enough that you do not brace yourself. You simply let your balance find its place. The river is already moving, already doing what it does. It glides between the banks with a steady inward intention, sliding past stones that do not interrupt it, only shape it. There is no rush in the sound, no bright chatter, just layers. A low slide beneath a softer brushing where reeds lean close to the edge, their stems moving in small, repeated answers. You do not hurry to begin, not because you are waiting, because there is nothing to catch up with. The work is not ahead of you. It is here, in the way water holds its line, in the way it repeats itself so patiently that repetition becomes structure. You find a flat stone near the margin and set your satchel down. The stone has been worn shallow in one place, not a crack, not a break, a smooth dip, as if it has held the same weight in the same spot often enough for the surface to learn the shape of it. Your hand rests there for a moment without thought. The temperature meets your palm exactly, neither cool nor warm, so even it barely registers as sensation, just contact. Then you let go. The current threads around a curve ahead. It folds along the outer edge of the bend, then eases back towards center, guided by the simplest thing of all: gradient. The surface does not sparkle. It gathers light in a muted way, holding it rather than throwing it back. Above, the canopy is close enough to thin the sky into strips. Not dark, not bright, just softened. Light filters through in quiet bands that move slowly as leaves rearrange themselves by fractions. Nothing dramatic shifts. Everything simply finds its next position. Your map remains rolled inside the satchel for now. First comes walking, not along a marked trail, along the slow margin where water meets earth. The bank curves gently, and you follow that curve as if it has already been drawn. Your steps adjust to small inclines without instruction. Gravel gives way to soil. Soil returns to stone, then back again. Heel, roll, release. The rhythm settles. You begin to notice the river's voice more clearly as you move. It does not speak in volume here. It murmurs in textures. A smooth slide where the flow is deeper. A quieter brushing where reeds and grasses dip their tips and lift again. Now and then, a small eddy gathers near the inside of a bend, turning gently in place, patient enough to be called stillness even while it moves. You pause, not because you must, because the river does. There is a shallow inward dip in the bank where water has pressed over time. The indentation is subtle but consistent. You can see it as a line that repeats itself, not erosion in any dramatic sense. Repetition made visible. You study it without trying to summarize it. Your eyes trace the shape once, then again, then let it rest. You kneel. The movement happens in stages, knees bending, weight shifting, hands settling briefly against your thigh. The ground accepts you with the same quiet give it offered your boots. You unroll the map across your knee. The paper carries faint creases from years of folding. One fold never quite aligns with the others. A corner near the edge curls upward slightly even when you press it flat. You smooth it once, gently, knowing it will lift again. A pencil rests in the spine of your notebook, worn to one side where your grip always settles. You remove it without looking. The first mark is small, a curve that mirrors the one before you. You do not measure in haste. You look, then look again. The river's bend is not symmetrical. It leans outward before drawing back in, and you allow your line to carry that slight asymmetry. A clean curve would be easier. You do not choose easy. You choose true. The mark does not complete anything. It joins what already exists. You rise again, slowly. The body gathers itself in quiet stages. Boots press into damp soil, then lift free. A faint imprint remains near the bank. Even as you watch, the edges begin to soften as moisture seeps towards it. The river does not erase it, it simply continues beside it. You walk again, slightly closer to the current. Ahead, the stream narrows further between two low shelves of stone. Water does not strike them sharply. It glides along their surfaces, parting and rejoining without emphasis. The sound shifts here, not louder, higher by a fraction where the flow thins and passes more tightly. You step onto one of the stones and test its hold. It remains steady. From this vantage point, the surface looks smoother, the movement less visible but more certain. Beneath it, darker shapes drift, leaf shadow, silt shadow, depth holding itself quietly. Near the roots on the far side, the water carries a faint copper warmth. Not a glow, more like color held inside the liquid, revealed only when the light above thins just enough. You make another mark, a narrowing, a soft constriction, a line that gathers inward then relaxes again. The river does not resist being drawn. It is not being captured. It is being acknowledged. You notice near the edge of the stone shelf a faint scratch. Curved, shallow, not deep enough to be damage. It resembles the arc of a fingernail dragged idly across the surface long ago. It has no bearing on the current. It does not alter the line you draw. It simply exists within the same corridor of time. You step down and follow the water as it widens again beyond the constriction. The widening is modest, a breath. The flow eases, spreading its energy across a broader plane, and the sound lowers into something steadier. You find yourself breathing with it. In, out, not as a technique, as alignment. The map rests against your forearm now as you walk. You do not record every shift, only the ones that feel enduring, the ones that repeat. A gathered cluster of reeds bends at the inside of the bend. Yield, return, yield. Return, their roots hold firm beneath the surface, while the upper stems move with the water's passing decisions. You trace that section too, not each reed. Just the suggestion of growth where the bank dips inward and the current slackens. Beyond the far bank, forest remains present but indistinct. It frames the river rather than claiming it. The canopy does not open fully here. It allows the water to pass beneath in a quieter register. Light filters down in softened layers. No flashes, muted streaks that dissolve as the surface rearranges itself. You step forward again. The river deepens by a fraction along the outer curve. The color shifts there, darker, denser, not opaque, layered. The surface remains calm, but you can sense the added weight beneath it. You pause and rest the map briefly against your thigh. The air carries a faint mineral scent. Stone, leaf, and something older beneath that. Not decay, not growth, just persistence. Water moving through the same corridor year after year without announcement. You do not name it, you draw another curve. Broader, softer. The pencil presses slightly harder at the midpoint, leaving a darker stroke where your hand lingered. You do not erase it. You allow the pressure to remain visible. Attention has weight too. The river continues past you, unconcerned with being known. You fold the map partway and walk along the bank again, letting the current set the rhythm of your steps. Not ahead of it, not behind, simply along its margin where water and earth agree to meet. The mapping has begun, and the river, unhurried and precise, continues to draw itself beneath your feet. You continue downstream at an easy pace, not pushed, not pulled, just carried by the bank's gentle permissions. The ground becomes more consistent for a while, packed soil, a thin layer of leaf litter, occasional gravel that shifts once then settles. Your boots make a quieter sound here, less crunch, more muffled contact. The river keeps close, not pressing against the bank, not pulling away from it, simply remaining where it is as if closeness is its natural posture in the stretch. The current holds a steady middle temperament, not shallow enough to chatter, not deep enough to feel secretive. It glides, a single, continuous sentence of movement. You let the satchel sit against your hip as you walk. The strap finds the same place on your shoulder each time you adjust it, a familiar pressure, a stable point. The weight does not increase, it simply exists. You pass a section where the bank dips slightly inward, a modest recess, not a cove, just a soft pocket in the land where water can linger by a fraction longer before continuing. The surface there moves differently. A slower turn, a small gathered loop, then release. You stop long enough to notice, not to interpret, just to register. A short line is added to the map, a slight inward curve, a suggestion of stillness held inside motion. You stand again, the movement is unhurried, knees straighten, weight redistributes. Balance arrives before you need to think about it. The river narrows a little ahead, then widens again. Not dramatically, like a breath taken and let out. A modest tightening, a modest ease. The sound shifts with it. When the water compresses, the murmur becomes slightly higher. When it loosens, it rounds out again into something lower and steadier. You begin to recognize these changes before you see them, not as prediction, as familiarity. The river's logic is simple. The body learns simple things quickly. A thin line of exposed stones appears along the near edge. Small, pale, rounded. They sit half in water, half out, their tops dry and faintly chalked by sun that reached them earlier. You step near enough to feel the shift in footing. The edge here is firmer, more stone beneath soil, less give. The river's boundary feels clearer for a moment, not because it is fixed, because the materials change. Stone holds its place differently than mud does. The current brushes along it and keeps moving. No hesitation, no insistence, just contact and continuation. You kneel again, briefly. The map opens across your knee in the same habitual way. Paper creases, a corner lifting slightly as if it prefers the air. You smooth it once, then let it be. Your pencil makes two small decisions, a longer line to show the firmer outer edge, a shorter note to show the shallow stones. Nothing elaborate, just enough to join what is already there. You close the map partway and keep walking. The canopy shifts above you, not opening, not closing, rearranging. Leaves overlap and separate in small increments. Light changes accordingly. A softened band across the water, then a muted dimming, then a return. No hard contrast, only gradations. The river takes whatever light arrives and holds it quietly. It does not throw it back. It does not sparkle for attention. It simply carries it along its surface until it dissolves. A faint sound arrives from deeper in the trees. One brief bird call, contained, then gone. The forest does not build a chorus. It offers a single note and returns to its own stillness. You keep moving. Your pace does not change. The river does not acknowledge the sound. It continues as it was. The bank rises slightly, then levels again. Your steps adjust without thought. Heel, roll, release. The rhythm is steady enough that it begins to disappear into itself. Walking becomes less like an action and more like a condition. Present, ongoing, not needing commentary. You reach a section where roots lace the near bank, not exposed dramatically, just present in the soil's shape. Some roots press into the edge and hold it. Others trail close to the surface, dark lines beneath damp earth. The water touches them and passes, a faint softening at the boundary, a small reorganization of the surface pattern. Then the current resumes its usual glide. You pause at one route that extends slightly farther than the others. It does not break the flow. It gives the water a small reason to curve, a slight split, a slight rejoining. You make a quiet mark for it, not because the route matters as an object, because the behavior matters. The river has revealed one of its repeating habits. You stand again. The satchel shifts as you rise, then settles. The strap returns to its place. The body returns to its pace. Ahead, the river bends more decisively, not sharply, but clearly enough that the far bank becomes more visible, and the near bank begins to soften into a gradual slope. The color deepens near the outer edge. The center holds a steadier tone. You can feel the channel with your eyes, not as a measurement, as a weight, as a way the surface holds itself. You open the smaller notebook, the one for observations that may never become final marks. The pencil rests in your fingers, familiar as breath. You write one short line, not a sentence to remember, just a note. Outer curve deepens. Inner bank gives, your handwriting slopes slightly down at the end, a habit you do not correct. The river does not require neatness, it requires attention. And attention does not always arrive in straight lines. You close the notebook. The act feels complete. Nothing left hanging, no unfinished task. The river continues, so do you. The bank narrows again for a stretch, guided between two larger stones. They sit like quiet shoulders in the water, not symmetrical. One leans inward slightly more than the other. The current responds by choosing the wider side, deepening thereby a fraction, smoothing its surface as it compresses. You step onto the nearer stone, testing it with one foot before committing weight. It holds, solid, cool through the sole. From this small rise, you can see how the river behaves when it is briefly constrained. The surface tightens. The sound becomes more concentrated. Then, beyond the stones, the water releases itself back into a wider run, not bursting outward, simply easing, as though it has remembered it never needed to press in the first place. You draw the constriction carefully, 2 points approaching, one yielding more than the other, a line that narrows then opens, a line that does not announce its own cleverness, it just matches what is there. You step down again, back onto damp soil. The ground accepts your weight, then lets it go. The river carries on beside you, steady, unhurried, patient enough that the work begins to feel less like recording and more like companionship. You are not collecting the river, you are keeping pace with it, and for now that is enough. The bend completes itself gradually, not in a single gesture. In increments, you follow its outer arc first, then allow your path to soften inward as the bank lowers and the current spreads slightly wider. The air here feels heavier, not thick, just more held. Moisture gathers closer to the surface, resting against your skin in a way that feels steady rather than cool. The river does not change its pace dramatically. It adjusts by degrees. The sound grows lower as the channel deepens, less articulated, more sustained. You stop at a place where the bank has been pressed smooth, not carved, pressed. Repeated contact has flattened the soil into a subtle platform. You step onto it and notice how your boot leaves only the faintest impression before the dampness begins to round its edges. The mark will not hold for long. It does not need to. The river beside you carries a quieter seam of darker water through its center. You can see the shift in tone, not as shadow, but as density. It absorbs light differently, holds it longer, releases it slower. You crouch and let your gaze rest there. The darker seam does not wander. It keeps a steady line through the bend, even as the surface around it rearranges itself in soft undulations. You make a small notation. Central depth holds through outer curve, no elaboration, just recognition. When you rise, you notice a faint mechanical hum somewhere far beyond the trees. It is not loud, not intrusive, just present. A reminder that beyond this corridor of water and leaf, other rhythms continue. The hum does not disturb the river. It does not disturb you. It threads through the air briefly, then thins until it is indistinguishable from the forest's own quiet. You continue walking. The ground becomes slightly firmer again, less damp, more packed. Your steps sound clearer for a few strides, then soften once more as the soil changes underfoot. The river widens modestly, not enough to call it a new section, just enough to shift the balance between bank and center. The far edge slopes gently downward, allowing the water to spread across a shallow apron before gathering itself again. You watch the way it does this. The water does not rush outward when given space. It settles into it. It distributes its weight evenly. Then, once balanced, it continues forward. There is something particular about this behavior. It does not appear driven. It appears assured. You kneel again, this time closer to the surface. Your reflection appears faintly beside the darker seam, not detailed, just tone and outline. The river does not return your features precisely. It holds you as part of the same moving field. You extend your fingers toward the water, but stop just before contact. The air above it carries a subtle coolness, a thin layer of difference. You lower your hand slowly. The surface parts. There is no splash, no protest, just a gentle folding around your skin. The temperature is steady. Cool, yes, but not separate from you. It feels like continuity rather than contrast. You hold your hand there for a few breaths. In, out. The current presses lightly against your knuckles, then slides past. It does not cling. It does not push away. It accommodates. When you lift your hand, droplets gather briefly along your fingertips before returning to the river in small, quiet arcs. Each ring expands once, then softens into the larger movement. Nothing remains isolated. You sit back on your heels. The ground beneath you holds its shape. Your satchel rests against your side. The strap presses faintly into your shoulder. You notice the weight without adjusting it. Ahead, a small gravel bar extends partway into the channel. It does not block the flow. It alters the surface. A thin ripple forms across its length, evenly spaced, repeating with each passing cycle of water. You stand and walk toward it. The gravel shifts slightly beneath your boots, a low granular sound that settles quickly. You crouch and pick up one small stone, rounded, cool, heavier than it appears. You turn it once in your palm and notice a faint pale line across its face. A natural vein, subtle, you place it back where it was. The river does not respond. It continues its steady slide past the gravel bar. You make a light mark for the shallow shelf. Seasonal variation likely. The words are brief. The meaning is sufficient. As you rise, you become aware of a faint indentation in the soil just behind you. Not yours, older. Only the heel remains distinct, the rest softened into suggestion. You do not speculate. You simply notice that someone else once stood here long enough to leave weight behind. The river moved then as it moves now. The indentation did not alter its path. It did not need to. You resume walking. The bend begins to relax into a longer, straighter stretch. The channel deepens slightly along the center, and the sound lowers again into something nearly uniform. A sustained murmur, not varied, not flat, just continuous. Your steps begin to align with it more closely. The rhythm of walking becomes less conscious, less segmented. Lift, place, release. The sequence softens until it feels less like a pattern and more like an ongoing state. You pass beneath a thicker canopy where light dims another fraction. The river darkens in tone, but not in clarity. It absorbs the dimness evenly. The surface becomes smoother, less interrupted by small textures. You pause at a section where the bank slopes gradually into the water without a defined edge. Mud gives way to liquid in a seamless gradient. You lower yourself carefully and rest your palm flat against the surface. This time you do not dip your fingers. You let the water slide across your skin. The contact is broad, distributed. The coolness spreads slowly, then settles into neutrality. There is a moment where the sensation becomes difficult to distinguish from your own warmth. The boundary blurs. You hold the contact longer than before. The current continues to move around you, not disrupted, not redirected. When you lift your hand, the surface reforms immediately. No mark remains. The river does not retain impressions in the way paper does. It retains movement. You stand again. The act feels slower now, as though gravity and balance are negotiating with more care. Your spine aligns gradually. Your shoulders settle lower. The satchel's weight feels lighter, not because it has changed, but because your body has adjusted to it fully. You move further downstream. The river narrows slightly between two low rises in the bank. The constriction is subtle. The sound responds by becoming marginally clearer. A faint articulation returns. You step onto a flat stone near the edge. It holds firm beneath your weight. From this angle, you can see the deeper channel cutting a clean path through the center. The surface above it remains calm, but the tone shifts. You draw the narrowing, two lines approaching, then easing outward again beyond the rise, a single, unbroken gesture. The pencil feels warm in your hand. You do not rush the stroke. When you finish, you pause, not to review, to feel the alignment between line and river. It holds, you close the map slowly. The paper creases settle into place. The corner lifts slightly again, you let it. The act of mapping does not require perfection of edges. It requires presence of attention. The river widens again beyond the narrowing, opening into a shallow basin that is not quite a pool. The surface there appears smoother, less textured. The sound deepens into a lower register. You stand at its edge and watch how the current enters. It gathers slightly as it approaches, then releases into the broader shape. No turbulence, just redistribution. Your breathing mirrors the pattern without instruction. Inhale, gather. Exhale, widen. There is something reassuring about water that knows its direction. It does not hesitate when given space. It does not rush when confined. It adapts. You feel a similar quality settling within you. The earlier focus on measurement softens. The lines on the map feel less like boundaries and more like acknowledgments. You sit briefly on a flat stone at the basin's edge. The contact through your clothing feels steady, grounded. Your feet rest lightly against damp gravel. The river brushes the tips of your boots when it rises slightly, then withdraws. The repetition is even. Contained, a small bird call arrives once from deeper in the forest. Clear, then gone. The sound does not echo. It does not build. It simply passes through the space and settles into memory. You do not turn your head. You remain facing the water. The basin holds its shape. The current continues to enter and leave without announcing either action. Your shoulders ease another fraction. Not intentionally, gradually. You realize that the river no longer feels like something you are observing from outside. It feels like something you are standing within, even while remaining dry. Its rhythm has entered your posture. Its steadiness has entered your breathing. The map rests closed at your side. There are more bends ahead, more narrowings, more widenings, but there is no sense of needing to reach them. The stretch you stand beside now is complete within itself. The river continues. You remain within its corridor. And for this moment, nothing further is required. You leave the basin without feeling that you have left anything behind. The water continues its even redistribution as you move along the bank. No farewell, no shift in tone, just continuity. The path narrows slightly where grasses lean inward, their tips grazing the surface in small repeated arcs. Each touch creates a faint circle that widens once then dissolves. You walk through this narrower corridor without brushing the grasses aside. They bend, they return. The river keeps its line. The forest grows quieter in a different way now. Not fewer sounds, more distance between them. The space between the murmur of water and the faint movement of leaves feels longer, more padded. Your steps respond. They lengthen slightly, then shorten again, not by decision, by correspondence. The ground here slopes gently toward the center channel. You can feel the pull of the deeper water even before you see it, not a physical tug. A tonal one. The color shifts subtly toward the middle, a darker ribbon threading forward beneath the softened surface. You step closer to the edge. The soil yields a fraction more than before. Your balance adjusts before thought arrives. Heel presses, toes steady, weight redistributes. The body aligns itself with the slope as though it has always known it. The river deepens further along this stretch, not dramatically, but enough that the sound lowers again into something nearly uniform. A long, sustained undertone, less variation, more continuity. You kneel and rest the map across your thigh once more. This time the paper feels less separate from what you see. The curves already drawn seem to anticipate the line ahead. You extend one of them slowly, a longer arc than before, broader, more confident. The pencil glides without hesitation. You pause halfway through the stroke, not to correct, to listen. The river passes beneath the sound of graphite on paper. A faint friction. Then stillness again. You complete the arc and lift the pencil. The line does not close. It does not need to. You stand again. The act of rising feels more fluid than before, as if the movement itself has borrowed the river's grammar. There is less segmentation now, less distinction between bending and straightening. Your body moves as one continuous adjustment. You continue downstream. The bank levels briefly, offering firmer footing. Your boots press into soil that holds more tightly, leaving sharper impressions that linger a moment longer before softening at the edges. You glance back once. The marks are already rounding. The river has not reached them. Moisture alone is enough. Ahead, the channel begins to curve inward more decisively. The outer bank grows steeper by degrees. The inner bank shallows. You can see the water gathering toward the deeper side, hugging the curve as if guided by quiet preference. The surface there darkens, not opaque, layered. You walk parallel to the deeper seam. Your breathing steadies into longer cycles. Inhale, a soft gathering in the ribs. Exhale, a thinning outward. The pattern repeats until it no longer feels like a pattern. It feels like baseline. You reach a point where two submerged stones create a slight deflection in the current. The water does not strike them, it folds around them. A small diagonal current forms where the main flow meets resistance. You crouch to observe. The diagonal seam appears and disappears in rhythm with subtle shifts in volume. It does not remain fixed. It reorganizes itself constantly. You make a small note, transient cross-current, then close the notebook. There is no need for more. The river continues to rearrange its own interior architecture without consulting the page. You rise and step onto a narrow strip of gravel that extends partway into the channel. The stones are smaller here, more uniform. They shift underfoot in soft whispers that settle immediately. The sound of water against them is faintly textured, not louder, just more articulated for a moment. You move slowly across the strip. The current brushes your boots lightly. A thin contact, then releases. You stand at the edge where gravel gives way to deeper water. The surface smooths again. The articulation fades. You notice how your attention has changed. Earlier, you tracked each alteration. Now you register them as part of a larger whole. Variation exists, but it does not demand isolation. The river narrows once more between two gentle rises in the land. The constriction is longer this time, a corridor rather than a pinch. The sound concentrates, not sharper, more focused. You step into the corridor of shade cast by overhanging branches. Light thins, edges soften. The water appears darker but remains readable. You pause halfway through the narrowing and close your eyes. Without sight, the river's presence feels more immediate. The undertone of movement becomes fuller. You can sense the shift in speed as the channel tightens. Not urgent, just slightly more defined. You open your eyes again and complete the passage. Beyond it, the river releases into another wider run. The sound lowers. The surface broadens. The transition is seamless. You feel something similar within yourself. A brief gathering of attention through the narrowing, then a quiet expansion again. The outer bank here carries a faint layering of sediment, thin bands of slightly different tones stacked one above the other. You trace them with your eyes, not as geology, as repetition, water rising and falling over seasons, leaving its quiet record. You draw a soft parallel line on the map to indicate the layered bank, then stop. The pencil rests loosely in your fingers. There is less to add now. The river has revealed its primary temperament: narrow, widen, deepen, release. The variations continue, but the underlying rhythm remains steady. You walk again. The forest opens slightly. More sky appears through the canopy. The light changes from muted green to a softer blue-gray. The water reflects this shift without brightening. It simply holds the new tone. A single leaf detaches from a branch and lands on the surface. It does not spin wildly. It drifts in a long, patient arc. You follow it with your eyes until it merges into the darker seam. Then you let it go. You are no longer following individual details for long. You are moving within the river's longer sentence. The bank rises gently on your right. The ground becomes firmer again. Your steps feel lighter, less impression left behind. The river remains beside you, steady, contained, unconcerned with being known. You reach a section where the channel straightens into a long, quiet run. The surface appears nearly continuous, minimal variation, just depth moving forward. You stop at its edge, not because this is a landmark, because it feels balanced. You stand without opening the map, without kneeling, without marking anything. The river does not require your line to continue its own. You feel the alignment more clearly now. The current's steady forward motion, your breath, your posture, the slight sway of balance from foot to foot. Everything occupies the same tempo. There is no urgency to measure what lies ahead. There is no sense of falling behind. The river does not rush toward its destination. It does not stall either. It continues. And you, walking beside it, begin to feel less like an observer tracing its course and more like an extension of its rhythm. The cartographer's task has not disappeared. It has softened. The lines you draw are no longer attempts to capture. They are acknowledgments of continuity. You take one more slow step along the bank, then another. The river deepens slightly toward the center. The sound lowers into its steady undertone. Light rests evenly across the surface, and the quiet between your steps grows longer, more spacious, as though the river has widened within you as well. You remain at the edge of the long, straight run a little longer, not searching for anything additional, simply allowing the steadiness to settle fully. The surface here carries almost no visible interruption, just a slow, continuous translation of volume from one place to the next. You notice how the darker seam through the center no longer feels separate from the lighter water near the bank. The distinction has thinned. Both move at the same unhurried pace. You shift your weight slightly from one foot to the other. The adjustment is small, barely perceptible, yet it echoes the river's own internal shifts. A minor redistribution, then stillness again. There is a low branch overhead that bends toward the channel without touching it. Its leaves hover just above the surface, close enough to suggest contact, but never quite making it. You watch how the water passes beneath without rising to meet them. proximity without interference. It feels like an answer to something you did not need to ask. You take a few more steps along the bank. The gravel transitions back into softer soil. The ground receives you more fully now. Your boots press deeper, then lift free with less sound. Behind you, the straight stretch continues without change. Ahead, the river begins the faintest suggestion of another curve, not yet visible in full. Just implied in the way the far bank shifts by degrees, you do not hurry toward it. The present section is complete, balanced, holding its own quiet architecture. You breathe in slowly. The air feels cooler again near the surface. You breathe out. The exhale lengthens without effort. The river continues, and you continue with it, not anticipating the next bend, but resting within the one that is already here. The faint suggestion of a bend ahead becomes clearer as you walk, not suddenly, gradually. The far bank begins to lean inward by degrees, and the central seam of darker water adjusts its line in quiet response. You do not quicken your pace. You let the river reveal its next shape at the speed it prefers. The ground beneath your boots softens again, damp enough to hold the outline of your step for a moment longer than before. When you lift your foot, the imprint remains. Then the edges begin to round. Water seeps slowly toward it from below. The river does not need to reach it directly. Moisture alone is enough to begin the return. You notice this without bending to inspect it, just a brief recognition. Everything here softens back into itself. The bend draws nearer. The outer bank rises slightly. The inner bank lowers, allowing a shallow apron of water to spread thinly before gathering again. The current responds with subtlety. It leans toward the deeper side, not abruptly, but with an assured inward curve. You pause near the beginning of the arc. The sound shifts, not louder, more concentrated, a narrower register within the broader tone. You close your eyes briefly. The shift becomes more distinct without sight. The water's movement gathers into a quieter focus as it compresses against the outer bank. You open your eyes again. The surface reflects a darker band of canopy here. Leaves overlap above, thinning the light into longer strips. The water holds that tone evenly. You kneel and open the map once more. The paper carries the previous curves forward without strain. You extend the lines slowly into the new bend. This arc is slightly tighter than the last, not sharp, just more deliberate. Your pencil presses a fraction more firmly as the curve deepens. You let that pressure remain, a record of attention. You add a second, lighter line to indicate the shallower inner edge. Two parallel suggestions, depth and ease. When you look up again, the river has not altered its rhythm. It never waits for your line to complete itself. It continues in its own time. You stand. The act feels even more fluid now, less segmented. Your spine lengthens. Your knees unfold. Your weight shifts forward without abruptness. You step along the outer bank. The soil here is firmer, packed by the repeated press of water during higher seasons. A faint layering is visible where sediment once settled, then receded. Thin horizontal bands, each slightly different in tone. You trace them with your eyes, not as a geographer. As someone who has stood here before, you make a short note. Seasonal reach visible, then close the notebook. A single drop of water falls from a leaf above and lands near the edge of the current. It creates a small circle that widens once, then blends seamlessly into the larger movement. You do not look up to find the source. The origin is less important than the continuity. You continue walking through the curve. The river narrows slightly midway through the bend, not dramatically, just enough that the surface tightens. The sound concentrates again. You feel it in your chest before you consciously register it. A subtle inward gathering, a compression that does not feel tense, just contained. Then, as you reach the latter half of the arc, the channel widens once more. The sound lowers, the surface spreads. The transition feels almost like a breath completing itself. You pause again, not because the bend requires it, but because the rhythm invites it. You rest your palm lightly on the surface. This time, you do not submerge your fingers. You let the water slide across the broad plane of your skin. The contact is even, distributed. The coolness moves across your palm and settles into something neutral. You hold it there for a few breaths. Inhale, exhale, the river passes. When you lift your hand, there is no lingering mark. The surface reforms without hesitation. You remain crouched for a moment longer. The bank slopes gently here. The air carries a faint scent of moss and damp bark. Not strong, just present. You become aware of a small irregularity in the stone beside you. A shallow notch worn smooth at the edges. It is not deep, not recent. Perhaps once the edge of a tool rested there, or perhaps it is only the cumulative press of water over time. You run your thumb lightly along it. The stone does not answer. It simply holds its shape. You stand and move forward again. The bend completes itself and eases into a longer stretch. This section feels more settled, less variation in the surface, more uniform depth. The darker seam runs steadily through the center without wavering. You walk parallel to it. The rhythm of your steps aligns without effort. Lift, place, release. The sequence no longer feels mechanical. It feels continuous. You notice how your shoulders have lowered by degrees, not intentionally, gradually. The strap of your satchel rests more evenly across your shoulder. The weight feels integrated rather than carried. Ahead, the river widens slightly more than before, not into a basin, just into a broader run. The banks pull back a fraction. The current redistributes across the width. The sound becomes more diffuse. You stop at the edge and let your gaze soften. Instead of tracking individual ripples, you take in the entire width at once. The outer bank, the center seam, the shallower inner edge. The pattern holds steady. There is something reassuring about water that knows its direction. It does not need to assert it. It simply continues. You kneel and make one longer mark across the map to indicate this widening. A gentle outward sweep, then a slight taper at the far end. The pencil moves more lightly now, less pressure, less need to confirm. When you close the map, the act feels less like finishing a task and more like acknowledging a pause. You rise again. The ground here is layered with fine silt. Your boots sink slightly deeper before lifting free. The impression remains a moment longer than before, then softens. The river moves beside you with the same steady undertone. No escalation, no sudden drop, just continuation. You become aware of a faint hum again from beyond the trees. Distant, mechanical. It threads briefly through the air and then thins until it is indistinguishable from the river's own low tone. You do not turn toward it. You remain aligned with the water. The forest canopy opens slightly above. More sky appears. The light shifts from muted green to a softer gray-blue. The surface of the river holds the change without brightening. It absorbs it. You slow, not because the terrain demands it, because the rhythm has widened. Your steps lengthen. The intervals between them expand. The river appears to move more slowly here, though you know it has not altered its pace significantly. It is the width that changes perception. You reach a small protruding root along the bank. The current folds around it gently, a slight split, a quiet rejoining. You crouch to watch. The movement repeats. Yield, return, yield, return. You make no mark this time. The behavior has already been recorded in earlier sections. You recognize it now without needing to draw it again. You stand. The act feels even less separate from the walking than before. The body moves as one extended adjustment. The river begins to hint at another narrowing ahead. The far bank curves inward by degrees. The central seam grows slightly darker. You do not hurry. The present stretch is complete, balanced. You feel the alignment more clearly now. The river's steady forward motion, your breath, your posture, the slight sway of your hips as you walk. Everything occupies the same tempo. You take one more slow step along the bank, then another. The darker seam through the center no longer feels separate from the lighter water near the edge. The distinction has thinned. Both move at the same unhurried pace. You realize that the mapping has shifted from observation to absorption. The lines you draw are no longer attempts to define, they are acknowledgments of continuity. The river does not change because it is recorded. It continues because it is river. You move with it, not ahead, not behind, within the same long, patient arc, and the quiet between your steps grows wider still, as though the river has widened inside you as well. The hint of narrowing ahead does not arrive as a sharp turn, it gathers. The far bank inclines by degrees. The darker seam through the center thickens slightly, holding its tone longer before dissolving into the lighter edges. You walk toward it without anticipation. The ground beneath your boots grows firmer again, packed by seasons of higher water that once pressed further inland. A faint ridge marks that reach, not dramatic, just visible if you soften your gaze. You pause at the threshold of the narrowing. The sound concentrates, not louder, more focused, a contained register within the broader undertone. You step closer to the edge and notice how the surface tightens between the banks. The folds of water grow smaller, closer together, as though the river is gathering itself into a narrower channel of attention. You kneel and open the map once more. The page carries the previous curves without strain. You extend the line into this more deliberate arc. The stroke is steady, unhurried. Your hand does not correct itself mid-gesture. The river's bend feels assured enough that you allow the pencil to move in one continuous motion. When you lift the graphite from the paper, the line rests there without demand. You add a lighter parallel mark to suggest the shallower inner slope. Then stop. There is no need to elaborate. You close the map slowly. The paper creases settle back into their familiar alignment. A corner lifts. You let it. You rise again, and the act feels less like standing and more like lengthening. Your spine unfolds. Your weight transfers forward. Balance arrives before you think about it. You step into the narrowing. The outer bank rises higher here. Roots hold the soil in a firm lattice. Water brushes their tips and passes on. A slight diagonal seam forms where current meets resistance. It appears, then thins, then reappears with the next pulse. You do not record it. You have seen this behavior before. Recognition replaces novelty. Halfway through the constriction, you pause. The river moves beside you with quiet insistence. The sound is lower than earlier sections, but denser, as though more volume is moving through less space. You close your eyes briefly. Without sight, the narrowing feels interior, a subtle gathering in the center of your chest. Then, as the channel begins to widen again, that gathering eases. The rhythm expands. You open your eyes. The river releases into a broader run, not into a basin, into space. The banks pull back slightly. The current spreads, the surface smooths. You step out of the narrowing and feel the difference immediately. The sound diffuses. The folds lengthen. The darker seam softens into a more even distribution across the width. You walk along the newly widened stretch. The ground slopes gently toward the water. Your boots sink a fraction deeper into damp soil before lifting free. The imprint remains visible for a few breaths. Then moisture seeps upward and rounds its edges. You glance back once. The marks soften into suggestion. Nothing here holds shape for long without the river's consent. Ahead, the channel straightens. The surface appears almost continuous, a long, dark ribbon threading between banks that no longer assert themselves strongly. You stop at the edge and let your gaze broaden. Instead of tracking individual ripples, you take in the entire length of the stretch at once, from near bank to far, from shallow edge to deeper center. The pattern holds steady. You feel something shift inside you, not dramatic, just less distinction between where you end and where the river begins. Your breathing slows by degrees. Inhale, a gentle widening of the ribs. Exhale, a soft thinning outward. The rhythm matches the long, straight run. You crouch and let your palm rest flat against the surface again. The water slides beneath your skin. No sharp temperature difference, just continuity. You hold it there longer than before. The current passes, your hand remains. When you lift it, droplets cling briefly, then fall back without sound. The surface reforms instantly. You sit back on your heels. The forest behind you feels farther away now, not because it has moved, because your focus has settled fully into the water's movement. The canopy above filters the light into muted layers. The sky beyond has shifted into a deeper tone, not dark, just settled. You stand and begin walking again, though the word walking feels imprecise. The movement is smoother than that, less segmented. Your feet meet the earth without announcement. Heel, roll, release, but the sequence feels continuous rather than counted. The river remains beside you, steady, untroubled, unconcerned with being followed. A faint, irregular marking on a stone near the bank catches your eye. A shallow scratch, curved slightly, its edges rounded by time. You kneel and touch it lightly with your fingertip. It feels neither recent nor ancient. It simply exists. Someone once stood here long enough to press a mark into the surface. The river moved then as it moves now. It did not pause. It did not alter its line. It continued. You stand and let the stone remain as it is. You do not draw it. It belongs to this place in a way that does not require replication. The river begins to widen again, more subtly this time. The banks lean back. The center deepens. The surface smooths further. You notice that the distinction between darker seam and lighter edge has nearly dissolved. The entire width now carries the same tone, the same even glide. You slow, not because the ground changes, because the rhythm has widened inside you. The intervals between steps grow longer. The quiet between footfalls stretches. The river's undertone fills that space. You reach a shallow indentation in the bank where fine silt has gathered. The surface there appears almost still, not stagnant, simply slower. You crouch and trace a small arc in the silt with the tip of your pencil. The line forms clearly at first. Then the water eases forward and blurs it. Within moments, the mark softens into the surrounding texture. Not erased, absorbed, you watch without disappointment. The river does not preserve lines, it preserves motion. You drop the pencil back into your satchel and rise. The air feels cooler now. The evening has settled fully. Edges blur, contrast lowers. The river becomes a single, dark ribbon threading through shadow. You walk further along the bank. The forest floor grows softer underfoot. Moss thickens in patches. Your boots press into it gently, then lift without sound. The river curves once more, but the curve feels interior rather than visible. The shift happens gradually. The channel bends. The surface adjusts. Your body follows without conscious correction. You begin to sense the river not only as shape, but as presence. A steady architecture of movement that continues whether or not you watch it. Your awareness softens further. Thoughts that might have arisen earlier now pass like leaves on the surface. Present for a moment, then gone. The act of mapping has become secondary. The map remains in your satchel, folded, quiet. The river does not require your line to remain what it is. You stop at a final widening before the trees thicken again. This stretch feels complete, balanced. The water glides forward in one unbroken sheet. No debris, no obstruction. Just steady translation from one moment to the next. You stand with your hands resting loosely at your sides. Your shoulders have lowered fully now. The strap of your satchel presses lightly against your back. You hardly feel its weight. The river continues past you, not accelerating, not slowing, simply moving. You realize that the distinction between observing and belonging has thinned beyond usefulness. You are no longer walking beside a river. You are moving within the same long sentence. The current flows, your breath flows, the evening lowers evenly across both. You take one final slow step along the bank, then another. The ground receives you gently. The river remains steady. The forest holds its quiet, and the widening within you mirrors the widening in the channel until there is no longer a need to separate one from the other. The cartographer's lines rest folded in paper. The river's lines continue in water. And you, moving with it, no longer feel the need to distinguish between the two. The path draws you slightly inland, not away from the river, just at a gentler angle. The water remains visible through the trees, a darkened ribbon threading between trunks and low branches. You do not feel separated from it. Distance here is only visual. The rhythm remains intact. The forest floor shifts beneath your boots, less gravel now, more layered soil. Pine needles gather in soft drifts along the roots. When you step into them, the sound is absorbed almost entirely. Your movement becomes quieter than before. You walk parallel to the current without needing to see its exact edge. You can sense it in the low undertone beneath everything else. A sustained presence, not loud, not distant, simply continuous. The air has cooled another fraction. It rests along your cheeks and hands with a steadier touch, not sharp, just settled. You slow again where the trees open slightly, revealing a higher vantage above the river's bend. From here, the water appears darker, broader. The widening you stood beside earlier is visible in full now, the outer bank curving in a long, patient arc. You remain standing. There is no need to kneel, no need to record. You allow the view to rest within you without narrowing your focus. The river's surface carries long folds that travel diagonally across its width before smoothing out downstream. The pattern repeats: gather, lengthen, release. Your breathing mirrors it without effort. Inhale, a subtle expansion across the ribs. Exhale, a soft thinning outward. The pause between them widens slightly. You move again, following the forest path as it slopes gently downward toward the bank. The ground here is firmer. Roots interlace beneath the soil, creating a steady platform. Your steps feel grounded. Even, the river's sound grows marginally clearer as you descend. Not louder, closer. The tone remains low and sustained. You reach a section where the bank rises in a shallow terrace. Grass grows in sparse clusters here, their blades bending toward the water but never fully touching it. You step onto the terrace and sit, not because you are tired, because the river's pace invites stillness. From this angle, the channel appears almost level with your gaze. The surface reflects the muted sky in a single darkened tone. No sharp highlights remain, only depth. A small ripple crosses from one side to the other. It widens, thins, disappears. You notice how the river's edges have softened further in the dimming light. The distinction between water and bank is less abrupt. Mud darkens into saturation. Roots merge into shadow. The line is implied rather than defined. You rest your forearms on your knees. The posture feels natural, balanced. Your satchel remains closed at your side. The map inside carries the earlier curves and constrictions, but here, in this steady widening, there is nothing urgent to add. The river moves. It does not ask to be captured in full. A faint breeze travels along the channel, not across it, along it. The surface responds in elongated, low ripples that stretch in the direction of flow. The breeze passes, the ripples settle. The undertone resumes its even register. You rise again. The act feels smooth, unsegmented. Your weight shifts forward, knees straighten. Balance arrives before you register the effort. You step down from the terrace and continue along the bank. The ground dips closer to the waterline now. Your boots brush damp soil that yields slightly, then firms beneath you. You walk nearer to the surface than before. The proximity changes the sensation. The air carries more moisture here. It feels denser against your skin. The river widens further ahead into another slow basin. Not as pronounced as the earlier one, more gradual, you approach without anticipation. The surface here is darker still, holding light rather than reflecting it. You step close enough that the tips of your boots graze the water when it rises by a fraction. The contact is gentle, repetitive, consistent. You remain standing, hands resting loosely at your sides. Your awareness settles fully into the rhythm of contact and release. Brush, withdraw, brush, withdraw. The pattern continues. There is no need to count it. You close your eyes briefly. Without sight, the river becomes more present. The sound feels internal. The slight pressure at your boots registers like breath against skin. You inhale slowly. The air enters without resistance. You exhale. The pause after lengthens, unforced. When you open your eyes, the basin appears even darker. The sky has lowered further into evening. Edges blur. The forest canopy merges into a continuous silhouette. You step back from the waterline and walk along the basin's edge. The ground here is fine sediment. Each step leaves a clear imprint at first. Then the moisture seeps inward, rounding its edges. The mark softens. You glance down once. The impressions no longer feel like evidence of your passage. They feel temporary. You stop at a point where the basin narrows slightly again. The current gathers without hurry. The surface tightens by a fraction. The undertone deepens. You sense the shift in your own center as well. A gentle gathering behind the ribs, then easing as the channel releases downstream. You kneel and rest your palm flat against the surface once more. The water moves around your skin without disruption. The temperature difference has nearly vanished now. Cool and warm meet without contrast. You hold your hand there longer. Movement passes through. You remain still. When you withdraw your hand, droplets cling briefly, then descend back into the basin without sound. The surface reforms instantly. No evidence remains. You sit back on your heels and allow the moment to settle. The river does not change its pace. It does not respond to your presence in any visible way, and yet the alignment between your rhythm and its own feels complete. You rise and walk again, following the basin as it curves. The path draws slightly inland once more. The river remains visible through the thinning trees, a dark ribbon threading through shadow. You move parallel to it, not ahead, not behind, simply alongside. The forest grows quieter, not silent, just less articulated. The space between sounds widens. Your steps shorten, the intervals between them stretch. You feel less like you are traveling towards something and more like you are resting within something already complete. The river widens one final time before bending out of view. The widening feels expansive, but not dramatic. A long, low breath drawn across the forest floor. You stop at the edge, hands resting loosely at your sides, shoulders lowered fully now. The strap of your satchel presses lightly against your back. You hardly feel its weight. The water glides forward in a continuous sheet. No debris interrupts it. No branch crosses its surface. Just steady translation from one moment to the next. You realize that the act of mapping has dissolved entirely here. There is no need to measure, no need to capture. The river's line continues whether you draw it or not. Your breathing slows further. Inhale, a gentle widening across the ribs. Exhale, a soft thinning outward. The pause between them stretches comfortably. You remain there as the evening settles fully. The sky deepens into a uniform tone. The water darkens to match. The forest merges into silhouette. The distinction between surface and depth blurs. The river bends ahead out of sight, not ending, continuing. You turn slowly away from the widening. The movement is gradual, unforced. Your feet pivot on damp earth. The body aligns with the path back through the trees. The river's undertone remains beside you, not fading quickly. Threading through the forest air, you begin walking inland. The ground rises gently beneath your boots. Moss cushions your steps, needles compress and release. The rhythm remains steady. Lift, place, release, inhale, exhale, flow. The mapping you began earlier rests folded in paper. The river continues in water, and as you move away from the basin and into the forest's deeper quiet, the two feel less like separate acts and more like the same long, patient arc, continuing without demand, without urgency, without end. You continue inland, though inland no longer feels separate from water. The river remains to your left, not always visible, always present. The sound threads through trunks and undergrowth in a low, even register. Not calling, not fading, simply there. The forest floor rises slightly, then levels. Your steps adjust without thought. Heel settles, weight transfers, release. The movement feels less segmented now, more continuous, as though the ground and your body have agreed on a shared rhythm. Light has lowered further, not disappearing. Thinning, the canopy absorbs the last variations of color and redistributes them evenly. Greens soften into gray-green. Brown bark darkens into silhouette. The river's surface, glimpsed between branches, appears almost velvety, absorptive rather than reflective. You slow where the trees open again, just enough to reveal a longer stretch of water ahead. From this higher vantage, the river's widening and narrowing become more legible as a single gesture. It does not move in pieces. It moves as one extended line, a long sentence without punctuation. You remain standing, hands resting loosely, breath steady. Inhale, subtle expansion. Exhale, longer thinning. The pause widens. The river narrows slightly below you, threading between two darker banks. The sound deepens there, not louder, more concentrated. You feel the same slight concentration within yourself, a quiet gathering behind the ribs. Then release as the channel opens again beyond the bend. You descend toward the bank once more. The slope is gentle. Soil holds firm. Roots provide steady footing. Your boots leave little impression now. The ground receives and reforms. At the water's edge, the surface appears almost still. But you know better. Movement continues beneath. You step close enough that the tips of your boots feel the faintest brush of current. Contact, withdrawal, contact, withdrawal. The repetition is steady. You do not count it. You let it shape the pace of your breath. A small stick drifts into view from upstream. It travels lengthwise, aligned with the current. It does not spin wildly. It follows the center line where depth holds it steady. When it reaches a slight widening, it slows by a fraction, then continues. You watch it pass without tracking where it goes next. There is no need. You kneel not abruptly. Gradually, your hand lowers to the surface again. This time you do not submerge your fingers fully. You let the water slide across your knuckles. Coolness registers faintly, then equalizes. The boundary dissolves. The current bends around your skin without resistance. You hold your hand there. Still, movement passes. You remain. The sensation is less about touch now and more about alignment. When you lift your hand, the surface reforms instantly. No ripple carries your presence downstream. You rise and step back. The act of standing feels elongated, unhurried. Your weight shifts, spine lengthens, balance settles. The forest behind you feels closer, not in distance, in density. The air thickens slightly as night gathers. A faint mist begins to form above the river's surface. Barely visible, more felt than seen, it softens edges further. The banks lose definition. Water and air merge into a single tonal field. You walk parallel to the current again. Your steps shorten. The intervals stretch. You are no longer traveling to observe changes. You are moving within continuity. The river widens again, but subtly. The surface flattens into a long, dark ribbon. Light no longer glances across it. It rests within it, You stop at a shallow terrace of stone. Sit. The stone holds the day's last warmth beneath its surface. Not hot, not cool, balanced. Your hands rest on your knees. The posture feels complete. The river's undertone steadies into something nearly indistinguishable from silence. You realize that the earlier distinctions, faster stretch, narrower channel, gravel bar, constriction, have faded from your awareness. What remains is volume and motion, nothing else. A faint ripple travels from upstream and reaches the terrace where you sit. It touches the edge, withdraws, returns again. Each contact is soft, predictable. You close your eyes. Without sight, the river becomes breath, a low, sustained exhale. The forest becomes a wider inhalation. Air moves in, water moves on. The pattern repeats. When you open your eyes again, darkness has deepened another shade. The water reflects almost nothing now. It absorbs. You stand once more. The act feels weightless. Not because you are lighter, because the ground and body move in agreement. You step back from the terrace. The river continues without acknowledgement. It does not hold you in place. It does not release you. It moves. You follow inland a few paces. The path curves gently away from the water, then back toward it. You sense the river even when you cannot see it. A low line beneath everything else. Your breathing slows further. Inhale, exhale, the pause widens. You notice a faint marking on a stone beside the path, a shallow crescent indentation, not natural in its curve. Perhaps a tool once rested there. Perhaps a hand pressed firmly long ago. The mark has softened over seasons. It remains. You touch it lightly with your fingertips. The stone feels steady. Untroubled, you do not linger. You move on. The river narrows slightly ahead, drawing its volume inward. The sound deepens. You feel the same inward draw within yourself, a quiet centering. Then, as the channel opens again beyond the trees, release. The rhythm continues. You walk until the river widens one last time before bending out of view. This widening feels spacious but not dramatic. A long exhale across the forest floor. You stop at the edge, hands resting loosely, shoulders fully lowered. Your satchel presses lightly against your back. You hardly notice its weight. The water glides forward in a continuous sheet. No debris interrupts it. No branch crosses its surface. Only steady translation from one moment to the next. Your awareness grows broader, less anchored to specific sensation, more held by overall presence. Breath continues. Inhale, gentle expansion. Exhale, soft thinning. The pause lengthens again. The forest grows quieter still. The space between sounds widens until even the undertone of water feels internal rather than external. The distinction between river and body softens further. Your pulse aligns loosely with the current's steady flow. You remain there, not waiting, not concluding, simply within. The river bends ahead and disappears behind a stand of darker trees. Not ending, continuing, you turn slowly away. The movement is gradual. Your feet pivot on damp earth. The body aligns with the inland path. The river's presence remains, threaded through air, carried within your chest. You begin walking deeper into the forest. Moss cushions your steps. Needles compress and release. Lift, place, release, inhale, exhale, flow. The mapping has dissolved entirely now. What remains is rhythm. And as you move further from the water's visible edge, the undertone continues inside you, steady and unbroken, as though the river has shifted from landscape into cadence. It does not need to be seen to remain. It does not need to be measured to continue. It moves, and you move within it. The forest receives you without transition. There is no clear boundary between bank and undergrowth now, only a gradual thickening. The river remains somewhere to your left, not always visible, still present. Its undertone threads through the trunks in a low, even line. You walk deeper into the trees. The ground rises by degrees, not enough to register as effort, just a subtle incline that lengthens your stride. Your boots press into moss that yields, then reforms. No sharp sound accompanies your steps. The forest absorbs them. Light has lowered into a single, even tone. No shafts, no highlights. The canopy gathers what remains and redistributes it softly across bark and leaf. You slow without deciding to. The rhythm shifts from walking to inhabiting. You are no longer moving along a line, you are within a volume. The river's sound becomes less directional, more diffused. It no longer pulls your attention outward, it rests within the background. You stop beside a wide trunk. Its bark carries shallow ridges, worn smooth in places where weather has pressed against it season after season. You rest your palm lightly against the surface. The texture feels steady, neither cool nor warm. Just present, you do not lean, you simply stand. Breathing continues. Inhale, subtle expansion. Exhale, longer thinning. The pause widens. A faint movement passes through the leaves above. Not wind exactly, more like a slow redistribution of weight. Branches adjust by a fraction, then settle. You release the trunk and step forward again. The forest floor dips slightly into a shallow hollow, not carved by water, just a natural lowering. You descend into it without effort. The sound shifts here. The river's undertone deepens faintly, contained by the shallow bowl of earth. You pause at the center. The space feels gathered, not enclosed, held. Your shoulders lower another fraction. The satchel at your back feels nearly weightless now. You remain still long enough to notice how the air settles in this hollow. It lingers, not stagnant, just slower to circulate. A faint coolness gathers near your ankles. You step up the opposite side. The incline is gentle. Roots create steady footholds beneath your boots. The river reappears briefly through a break in the trees, a dark curve bending beyond sight. You do not approach it. You remain inland. The mapping has shifted entirely now. No pencil rests in your hand. No line requires extension. What remains is orientation without measurement. You walk until the trees thin slightly. Ahead, the ground opens into a broader clearing. Not large, just enough that the sky becomes visible as a single, uninterrupted plain. You step into it. The space feels expansive compared to the forest's layered interior. The river is visible again at the clearing's edge, a darkened sheet moving through the low ground. From this distance, its movement appears nearly imperceptible. The surface holds itself evenly. You stand at the center of the clearing, hands resting loosely, breath steady. Inhale, exhale, the pause widens. The clearing does not demand attention, it offers space. The river continues beyond its far edge, bending out of sight. You feel the alignment more clearly here. The river's steady forward motion, your breath, the quiet expansion of evening across the open ground. You take a slow step forward, then another, not toward the water, across the clearing. Your boots press into grass that bends and lifts again without sound. The horizon line of trees beyond the river grows darker. Edges blur further. The world reduces itself to tone and rhythm. You reach the far side of the clearing and stop. The river runs directly ahead now, not wide, not narrow, balanced. The surface carries no strong reflection, only depth. You do not kneel, you do not reach out, you remain standing. There is no need for contact. The alignment is already complete. The current glides forward without visible effort. No turbulence, no interruption, just steady translation. You notice how your breathing has slowed further. Inhale, a gentle widening across the ribs. Exhale, longer, softer. The pause stretches comfortably. The river's undertone blends with the quiet in your chest. They are no longer separate registers. A faint ripple travels across the surface. It widens, thins, disappears. You watch it without tracing its path. There is nothing to follow, nothing to anticipate. Evening deepens another shade. The sky above the clearing becomes uniform. The forest edge merges into silhouette. The river darkens into a single band threading through shadow. You take one more step toward the bank, close enough to sense the faint coolness rising from the surface, not enough to disturb it. Your boots rest on firm soil. The ground holds steady. You realize there is no distinction now between the act of walking and the act of standing. Both feel continuous. Both are held within the same long arc. You remain there as the light lowers fully into night. The river does not alter its pace. It does not announce the transition. It continues, a low, sustained line through dark. The clearing grows quieter still. The space between sounds widens until even the undertone of water feels internal. Your pulse aligns loosely with the current, not in tempo, in steadiness. You step back from the bank. The movement is gradual. Unforced, your feet pivot, the body turns. The river remains behind you, not diminished, simply continuing. You begin walking back through the clearing. Grass bends beneath your boots and rises again. The forest receives you once more. Trunks reappear as vertical lines in shadow. The path reforms beneath your feet without requiring memory. The river's presence remains threaded through the air. You move deeper into the trees. The ground levels, moss cushions each step. Lift, place, release, inhale, exhale, flow. The distinction between environment and body thins further. You are not traveling through forest. You are resting within it. The river is not something beside you. It is cadence. The clearing fades behind. The trees gather. The night settles evenly across bark and leaf. You slow until walking becomes nearly stillness. One final step. Then pause, breathing continues, the forest holds. The river continues beyond the trunks, unseen but unwavering. And you remain within this long, patient architecture of movement and quiet, suspended not in isolation, but in continuity, steady, unhurried, complete. The forest receives you without transition. There is no clear boundary between bank and undergrowth now, only a gradual thickening. The river remains somewhere to your left, not always visible, still present. Its undertone threads through the trunks in a low, even line. You walk deeper into the trees. The ground rises by degrees, not enough to register as effort, just a subtle incline that lengthens your stride. Your boots press into moss that yields, then reforms. No sharp sound accompanies your steps. The forest absorbs them. Light has lowered into a single, even tone. No shafts, no highlights. The canopy gathers what remains and redistributes it softly across bark and leaf. You slow without deciding to. The rhythm shifts from walking to inhabiting. You are no longer moving along a line. You are within a volume. The river's sound becomes less directional, more diffused. It no longer pulls your attention outward. It rests within the background. You stop beside a wide trunk. Its bark carries shallow ridges, worn smooth in places where weather has pressed against it season after season. You rest your palm lightly against the surface. The texture feels steady, neither cool nor warm, just present. You do not lean, you simply stand. Breathing continues. Inhale, subtle expansion. Exhale, longer thinning. The pause widens. A faint movement passes through the leaves above, not wind exactly, more like a slow redistribution of weight. Branches adjust by a fraction, then settle. You release the trunk and step forward again. The forest floor dips slightly into a shallow hollow, not carved by water, just a natural lowering. You descend into it without effort. The sound shifts here. The river's undertone deepens faintly, contained by the shallow bowl of earth. You pause at the center. The space feels gathered, not enclosed, held. Your shoulders lower another fraction. The satchel at your back feels nearly weightless now. You remain still long enough to notice how the air settles in this hollow. It lingers, not stagnant, just slower to circulate. A faint coolness gathers near your ankles. You step up the opposite side. The incline is gentle. Roots create steady footholds beneath your boots. The river reappears briefly through a break in the trees, a dark curve bending beyond sight. You do not approach it. You remain inland. The mapping has shifted entirely now. No pencil rests in your hand. No line requires extension. What remains is orientation without measurement. You walk until the trees thin slightly. Ahead, the ground opens into a broader clearing. Not large, just enough that the sky becomes visible as a single, uninterrupted plain. You step into it. The space feels expansive compared to the forest's layered interior. The river is visible again at the clearing's edge, a darkened sheet moving through the low ground. From this distance, its movement appears nearly imperceptible. The surface holds itself evenly. You stand at the center of the clearing, hands resting loosely, breath steady. Inhale, exhale, the pause widens. The clearing does not demand attention, it offers space. The river continues beyond its far edge, bending out of sight. You feel the alignment more clearly here. The river's steady forward motion, your breath, the quiet expansion of evening across the open ground. You take a slow step forward, then another, not toward the water, across the clearing. Your boots press into grass that bends and lifts again without sound. The horizon line of trees beyond the river grows darker. Edges blur further. The world reduces itself to tone and rhythm. You reach the far side of the clearing and stop. The river runs directly ahead now, not wide, not narrow, balanced. The surface carries no strong reflection, only depth. You do not kneel, you do not reach out, you remain standing. There is no need for contact. The alignment is already complete. The current glides forward without visible effort. No turbulence, no interruption, just steady translation. You notice how your breathing has slowed further. Inhale, a gentle widening across the ribs. Exhale, longer, softer. The pause stretches comfortably. The river's undertone blends with the quiet in your chest. They are no longer separate registers. A faint ripple travels across the surface. It widens, thins, disappears. You watch it without tracing its path. There is nothing to follow, nothing to anticipate. Evening deepens another shade. The sky above the clearing becomes uniform. The forest edge merges into silhouette. The river darkens into a single band threading through shadow. You take one more step toward the bank, close enough to sense the faint coolness rising from the surface. Not enough to disturb it. Your boots rest on firm soil. The ground holds steady. You realize there is no distinction now between the act of walking and the act of standing. Both feel continuous. Both are held within the same long arc. You remain there as the light lowers fully into night. The river does not alter its pace. It does not announce the transition. It continues, a low, sustained line through dark. The clearing grows quieter still. The space between sounds widens until even the undertone of water feels internal. Your pulse aligns loosely with the current, not in tempo, in steadiness. You step back from the bank. The movement is gradual. Unforced, your feet pivot, the body turns. The river remains behind you, not diminished, simply continuing. You begin walking back through the clearing. Grass bends beneath your boots and rises again. The forest receives you once more. Trunks reappear as vertical lines in shadow. The path reforms beneath your feet without requiring memory. The river's presence remains threaded through the air. You move deeper into the trees. The ground levels, moss cushions each step. Lift, place, release, inhale, exhale, flow. The distinction between environment and body thins further. You are not traveling through forest. You are resting within it. The river is not something beside you. It is cadence. The clearing fades behind. The trees gather. The night settles evenly across bark and leaf. You slow until walking becomes nearly stillness. One final step. Then pause, breathing continues, the forest holds. The river continues beyond the trunks, unseen but unwavering. And in the quiet that follows, nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be recorded. Nothing needs to be completed. The current moves whether you watch or not. The trees stand whether you return or not. The path remains whether it is taken or not. Your breath rises, your breath falls. The pause between them widens gently. You are no longer tracing the river. You are no longer following it. You are resting within the same long, patient motion. And the river continues. The path back does not feel like return. It feels like continuation in another direction. The forest receives you without commentary. The river remains present, though now partially veiled by trees and distance. You no longer need to see it fully to feel its measure. Its rhythm has settled somewhere beneath your breathing. Step, breath, step, release. The ground rises gently away from the bank. Soil replaces gravel. Roots thread across the path in shallow arcs. You move over them without hesitation. Balance adjusts before thought forms. The body understands terrain in ways that do not require language. The air feels thicker now, not heavy. Layered, moisture clings more fully to skin. It rests along the jaw, the wrists, the back of the neck. You do not brush it away. It belongs here. Behind you, the basin you left continues its quiet widening. You do not turn to confirm it. The certainty is enough. The river does not depend on observation. It does not alter itself when unseen. Ahead, the forest path narrows briefly between two leaning trunks. The space feels intimate rather than confined. Branches arch overhead, weaving a canopy that filters the last of the evening light into muted bands. The colors have shifted entirely now. Green has deepened toward shadow. Brown has softened toward charcoal. Water, where glimpsed through gaps in foliage, carries a darker sheen. Not black, dense, you slow without deciding to. The cadence has altered again. Earlier, your steps mirrored the steady glide of surface current. Now they resemble something deeper, a submerged channel, movement that is present but less visible. You pass a shallow indentation in the path where rain once gathered. It holds no water now, only darker soil marking where saturation used to be. You notice the outline briefly. Then it folds into the whole. The mapping has changed. You are no longer charting bends and banks. You are sensing continuities. How moisture remains in earth long after water has moved on. How sound lingers in air even after its source has drifted downstream. How the body carries rhythm after leaving the river's edge. A low branch brushes your shoulder. The contact is gentle. You do not flinch. The branch gives slightly, then settles back into place once you have passed. Nothing resists, nothing holds. The path curves inward again, bending toward the river though you cannot see it clearly. You feel the proximity in the subtle cooling of air, in the faint, steady undertone that hums beneath the quieter forest sounds. You pause, not because something demands attention, because stillness has grown larger. You stand with your feet planted evenly, weight balanced, shoulders loose. The river continues, you continue. The distinction remains soft. A faint glow lingers along the horizon where the canopy opens slightly. It does not brighten the forest, it simply outlines it. Trunks appear as vertical gradients rather than solid shapes. Leaves blend into one continuous texture overhead. You inhale slowly. The breath moves downward rather than outward. It fills the lower ribs, then the abdomen. The exhale lengthens without effort. You begin walking again, though walking feels almost optional. Movement happens because rhythm continues. The forest floor shifts beneath your boots from firm to faintly yielding and back again. Moss thickens along one side of the path. It absorbs sound entirely. Your steps become nearly silent. You pass a fallen log resting parallel to the river's direction. Its bark has softened. The surface feels damp but stable when you brush your fingertips along it. A shallow marking catches your eye there, not carved, pressed, perhaps from where a tool once rested, or where someone leaned heavily enough to leave a faint depression in the wood. The impression remains. Time has rounded it at the edges. You do not wonder about the hands that made it. You simply acknowledge that presence leaves traces, and water leaves none that cannot be reshaped. The path widens slightly as it moves away from the bank. Sound from the river grows softer but does not vanish. It settles into something internal now. You feel it more than hear it, a steady, even undertone, like breath beneath breath. You realize that your pace has slowed further still, not into stopping, into suspension. Each step holds a longer pause before the next begins. You do not count them, they do not need counting. The forest grows dimmer by degrees. Evening has completed its descent. The last light rests low and even, flattening color into tone. There is no sharpness left in edges, no urgency left in movement. You step onto a section of ground that slopes gently upward. The incline is modest. The body adjusts naturally. Calves engage. Breath deepens slightly, then steadies again at the top. From here, you catch a final, clear glimpse of the river through a break in the trees. It appears as a single dark ribbon, smooth, continuous, unbroken. The bend you stood beside earlier is no longer visible, only the suggestion of flow moving steadily onward. You stand without moving. The sight does not demand analysis. It completes something quietly. The river continues beyond that visible stretch. You know this without needing to see it. You step forward again. The forest path begins to curve away more distinctly now. The sound of water thins into memory, but the rhythm remains. Lift, place, release, inhale, exhale. The body feels lighter, not emptied. Aligned, shoulders rest lower than before, jaw unclenched, hands loose at your sides. A faint breeze threads through the trees, moving at a similar pace to your own. It brushes past your sleeves and continues without altering course. The night air settles evenly across skin. Cool but not cold, held, the mapping has reached its quietest form. Not lines on paper, not curves traced in graphite, but a steady internal alignment with something larger and slower than thought. You notice how easily your steps follow the curve of the path without conscious steering. The body has learned the forest's arc, the river's patience, the slope of ground, all without effort. A final route crosses the trail before it opens into a slightly clearer stretch of earth. You step over it gently, no stumble, no hesitation. The forest grows still, not silent, simply settled. The river moves beyond your hearing now, but it remains present in your breath, in the even pace of your heart, in the slow lowering of your shoulders. You walk a little farther, then a little farther still, until the path feels less like a destination and more like continuation of the same steady arc. There is no sense of completion, only easing. The evening holds everything evenly. The river flows beyond sight, and you carry its measured cadence within you, unhurried, unbroken, steady as water threading through stone. The forest does not close behind you. It remains open in the way water remains open. Continuous, unconcerned with departure. You continue along the path, though the sense of traveling has softened almost entirely. There is no distance being covered, only rhythm being maintained. The river is no longer visible through the trees. Its sound has thinned into something interior, a low steadiness that moves with your breath rather than beside your ears. You notice how evenly your steps fall now. No gravel crunch, no abrupt shift in footing. The earth feels receptive, padded by needles and leaf. Your weight settles and lifts without imprint. The air carries the faint scent of damp bark and moss cooling into evening. Not sharp, not sweet, stable. You allow your shoulders to lower another fraction. There is nothing left to measure, nothing left to mark. The river has completed its quiet instruction. You move beneath a section of canopy that thickens overhead. Light diffuses into near uniform tone. Tree trunks appear as vertical gradients rather than separate forms. Branches dissolve into a layered ceiling of shadow. Your breathing lengthens naturally. Inhale, slow. Exhale, longer. There is space between breaths now. a brief suspension that feels complete rather than empty. The path curves gently inland, though direction feels irrelevant. The ground levels, then dips slightly, then levels again. Your body adjusts without commentary. Knees flex, hips realign, balance settles. You pass a shallow hollow where rain once gathered. It holds only darker earth now. The impression remains faintly visible in the dim light, not erased, not emphasized, simply present, like the faint marking on stone, like the indentation in bark, like the soft curve of river against bank. Presence without demand. The forest grows quieter still. Sound does not vanish. It blends, the subtle shift of leaves, the almost imperceptible movement of air between trunks, the distant continuation of current somewhere beyond sight, all merge into one extended tone. You feel the rhythm of it along your spine. A gentle vertical alignment, head balanced above shoulders, shoulders above hips, feet placed evenly beneath you. There is no tension left to dissolve, only steadiness. You realize that the mapping of river and forest has turned inward completely. Earlier, you traced bends with pencil. Later, you traced flow with attention. Now the tracing has ceased. What remains is alignment. You slow further, not into stopping, into suspension. Each step takes longer to complete. The interval between one foot and the next widens gently. There is no urgency in reaching the clearing ahead. The clearing does not represent conclusion. It is simply another widening. You step into it. The canopy opens slightly above. A muted wash of twilight rests across the ground. The sky appears as a deeper blue-gray beyond the tree line. No stars yet visible, just depth. You stand at the center of the clearing, hands resting loosely at your sides, breath steady. The clearing does not echo, it absorbs. Sound from the forest edges rests here briefly before dissolving. You turn slowly, not scanning, just acknowledging space. Tree trunks form a loose perimeter, their outlines softened by dusk. The ground beneath your boots feels firm and even, balanced. You close your eyes, the forest remains, the river remains, not as image, as rhythm. Your breathing deepens slightly again. Inhale, exhale, longer now, slower. There is a sensation of widening internally, similar to the basin where the river expanded earlier. Compression dissolving into openness. No dramatic shift, just release. A faint breeze threads through the clearing. It brushes across your sleeves and continues without resistance. Your body responds subtly, swaying by a fraction before settling again. Balance remains intact. You notice how light has settled evenly across the space. There are no bright points left, no shadows sharp enough to define edge. Everything rests in gradient. The distinction between forest and sky softens, between ground and air, between you and environment. You open your eyes again. The clearing appears unchanged, but something within you has grown quieter still. The sense of self that began dissolving beside the river now feels diffused entirely into rhythm. You are not separate from the forest's stillness, not separate from the river's persistence, not separate from the cooling air that settles across skin. You take a slow breath in, allow it to expand downward rather than upward. Let it rest briefly, then release it without effort. There is no need to hold anything. No need to carry anything forward. The mapping has concluded in the only way it ever could, not with a final line, not with a completed chart, but with absorption into flow. You begin walking once more, though the walking now feels lighter than before. The path beyond the clearing slopes gently upward toward the edge of forest. Your steps are quiet, measured, unforced. The night has settled fully now. The sky above carries a deepened tone, smooth and even. The forest floor cools beneath your boots. You move through it without disruption. There is no need to look back toward the river. It continues. Unbroken, your breath continues. Unbroken, your pulse continues. Unbroken. The three rhythms align naturally. Flow, breath, step. You reach the edge of the forest where the path meets a broader stretch of open ground. The air feels wider here, less contained. The faintest outline of distant landscape rests beyond sight. You stop again, not because you must, because stillness has become the most natural posture. You stand with your weight balanced evenly between both feet. Spine upright, jaw soft, hands resting without tension. The forest behind you breathes quietly. The river beyond it continues its steady arc through darkness. You are not leaving them. You are carrying their measure within you. You inhale once more. Let the breath fill gently. Then release it slowly. Longer than before, the body feels complete. Nothing unfinished, nothing waiting. You allow your eyelids to lower halfway, not fully closed, not fully open. The world softens further. Edges blur into tone. Movement dissolves into stillness. The clearing behind you remains, the forest remains, the river remains, and you remain, aligned, steady, unhurried. There is no final mark to make, no closing sentence to write. The river does not conclude. It bends beyond view and continues its long, patient threading through earth and shadow. And you, having followed its quiet life from narrowing to widening, from mapping to merging, now stand in the same steady cadence it has always carried. Breath slow, body settled, awareness softened. Nothing required, nothing held. Just the ongoing, even flow beneath and within. The river continues as it always has. Its rhythm remains. You do not need to follow it. You are already within it. The night gathers, the quiet holds, and the rest will carry itself.